Welcome back to Real Talk for an Unreal World. My guest in this episode is Roger Burnley. Roger Burnley is a channel in this life, a channel for spiritual information which allows other people to unfold in their experience by listening to the simplistic philosophies that he delivers to help us navigate difficult experiences in our life with love. But he does that just with an awareness of an ability to tap into something more. And these days, who isn't looking for a way out of a difficult experience that they've been carrying for quite some time? This guy has an amazing energy to him. Just being around him is a wonderful thing to have been a part of, just because Roger's a real deal. He's vulnerable. He talks about not having it all figured out, but he certainly is learning to use his gifts along the way. And the greatest thing he has learned is to share that with people around him. He is the developer of the program called Your Last Development Program. It's a program designed to help you grow through avenues in your life that are difficult to talk about. I would highly recommend looking into all of his stuff, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did having it. Thanks for being here.
I just finished my meeting with Gaia, and I'm going to start out there.
Please.
Because what happens for all of us as we live our lives, we come to understand who we are, and then sometimes it can move us into much bigger dimensions or areas than we ever thought of. And that's the thing I want everybody to come to understand, because that's really what's going on in our lives and in the world right now.
Okay.
Because I hid forever from the work that I'm doing now for years and years as I was developing that. And I wanted to find out how I got there. So that was my first question that I had today, because I'm now going to be exposed to thousands of people where I've been hiding before, you see? Right. And there's no explanation, number one, because the person that got me there, he can't remember where he found me. No one knows where they found me. And I'm saying this because I want people to understand, when they become willing to embrace who they are, the universe will just start having things show up.
Right. Yeah. I just had a recording before with Pei Ming, and we were talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
Taking a chance on ourselves is so difficult because we fear the unknown. But rather, when we take opportunities that the universe offers us to step out of our dense energies and go into spaces that are clear, that have not been created of any energy yet, it will work with us it's almost as if it's the reward for listening or engaging in that growth of self.
And for you to mention her, that's so fascinating, because I had a meeting with her, okay, which of course, random, right? We would have thought it was random, but it wasn't. She just happened to mention something in the serving circle, about the podcast she was doing. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll be a guest. I'm always willing to do that. But then she comes in and she brings this gene code thing that she had done, a chart of me. And I had never read anything more accurate. And on that particular day, because it was if you think of, we all look at our astrology charts and all of that, or we get Akashic records or whatever it might be, but it's that validation of something that we feel inside. That's what we all do when we see, an astrology reading or anything like that. And what she said, that particular printout that she gave me, I said, this is the most accurate thing I've ever read.
Wow.
How did that happen? And she was kind of explaining the science of it in a sense, but that's what she's really working with. And it's, if you haven't had it done, you should have her do it for you. It was pretty amazing.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I actually am going to the masterclass tonight. She sent me a link for that.
Perfect.
Because how I've seen the value in my podcast is I believe we all have a story within us, right, which is our experience. And then once we become aware of the experience and the ability to create our reality, now we find purpose. So I've found that with my podcast guests, I love bringing on and introducing individuals to the experience. So
Right.
today we have Roger. We're going to learn about the experience. And I'm going to bring you back on and we're going to talk more about the purpose because it's so vast when you find the purpose because the connection to the knowledge is just
Right.
continuous.
You said something so valuable, and that was story. You said everyone has a story, right? And so, what I was told when I received this information, um, I was told that if more people could understand this one message and accept it, because we all have different things that happen in our lives that we don't completely understand, but they said, but that was part of our evolutionary journey. And the more people who can come to accept and honor their story, then they live the lives they're supposed to have, and we create something different. I'm just going to read this real quick because you'll get it. Okay,
Yeah.
and this came through in January 11th of 2012.
Okay.
Your story is unique and valuable. It is unique because no other soul shares precisely your story. It holds the utmost value for you. Your story is comprised of everything your past holds, including all that has occurred for you, happened to you, everything you have done, every person you have met, and every word you have spoken. All of it has been and always will be perfect. Your only job then is to seek to know the perfection of your story. Any aspect of your particular story that you attempt to ignore, dismiss, or judge will cause you to experience some difficulty because you are refusing to receive the information and wisdom that your story holds. That was that was the message.
I gotta tell you, like I watched the video you sent me, the path to Euphoria,
Oh yeah,
and the writings that you channel through you are so clear, poetic in their simplicity, in there's an immense amount of value in how easy it is to digest. I just I understand it, but I'm thinking like, and you even said in the video in the path to Euphoria, you said I would have loved to have had this information when I was
yes,
a youth. And
yes,
I read these things that you channeled through now, and I'm like, this is so beautiful. Like, this is, like you say, the code to
right,
become aware if we can get out of our own way. And I
yes,
think that the density of our own way is ingrained in the mechanism of the human pattern
oh yeah,
because of its practice. So even when we see these beautiful words and these simplistic phrases with so much value and education in them,
mm-hmm.
how does one get out of its own way to adopt the methods as a new principle to practice? I think that's the question.
The question, because that's why I love talking about these messages, because at the time that I received them, I didn't know what they meant. I couldn't understand them because there's a consciousness, a higher consciousness that we're all connected to. We just will access it in different ways. But it was shocking to me when I would go back and read some of those, and I go, why didn't I understand it then when I first wrote it? But see, that's what we all do. We have these limited our limited awareness from however we've been programmed, whatever, and all of that. And so when went into that other state, when I'm doing, Wilhelm, when I'm channeling or doing automatic writing, I'm in a different state, and I can always feel, and I knew the difference even when I was in the very beginning. And sometimes I would resist. This was the funny thing. I would sit there and I'm receiving information, but I wasn't going to write it. I'm hearing it very clearly, but I'm not going to write it because, see, then the writing of it, which I'd have to pay attention, I'd have to understand what was being said. Most times we're just running from ourselves. We're just not looking, and that's what that message, even the one I just read you about your story, that last part of it, I couldn't do. When it says, don't judge the stuff that you've gone through, I judged all of it. And so I wasn't getting the stuff. I wasn't getting the wisdom because of the judgment. And I think that's what we do a lot.
Yeah, and I love how vulnerable you are with your own human experience. Like this is it's so it's just really nice to see somebody who has obtained a gift of channeling of channeling writing or automatic writing and receiving information through the vessel, through the spiritual conception of something more, yet the human element of you was still blocked due to its
Oh, yeah.
its learned behaviors and
That's
its
that's
fear.
it.
Oh, the result of its fear. Like you said that in the path to euphoria, you had said like I resisted talking
Mhm.
about this information for 4 years because I didn't think anyone would get it. And
Right.
I'm like listening to the path to the euphoria. This is on YouTube. I'm going to put the link below. But I was just like, wow, fear is such a powerful thing that we create
Right.
because it restricts information, it restricts growth. But it was really cool to see that you talk about that as well.
Thank you. And the funny thing, if people ever see my book, this is kind of funny too. Because I'm always transparent. I knew we all have guidance. We have intuition. It feels it pushes us. Sometimes we listen. But when I knew that I wanted to talk about this a little bit more, I thought the easiest way would be first to do a book because I wasn't doing channeling or anything in public. I wasn't doing any of that. So I said, okay, if I can write a book, that would be easier. And so I said, I'm going to write the book is going to be Overcoming Fear, a Guide to Freedom. Because that's all we're doing all the time is moving through fear. Because I
Right.
started to understand that so many of the messages that I would receive was me dealing with my fear about doing something. And so I just wanted to give that to others. But in the beginning of the book, I say, well, I really wanted to write this book. There was only one problem I had. Fear. And I had, and my friend, and it wouldn't have gotten done unless my friend, she's edited it and did put it together, Cam Kaminsky. So she did all of that and stayed on my case. Sometimes we need to have someone help us be accountable because how do we know? We just kind of stop at times. And so that's what goes on too.
Right. Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, that you put yourself out there. Can you help me and help the listeners like understand how like someone steps into channeling? Because this happened for you in 1989, but it took a while to integrate. So,
Well, okay, let's do that. I'm glad you said that.
yeah.
The writing started happening in 1989. I spent 20 years hiding even that aspect of it. I didn't want people to see it. A few friends and family kind of saw some of it. Um, but then I think it was 2008 or 9 or something like that, someone found one of the messages on my desk at an office that I had at the time. And they read it and they said, wow, this really helps me. Where'd it come from? I go, oh yeah, I wrote that. It came through me. I say, I'm still not completely owning it, even as they're saying that. And they're telling me that it's helping them, but I was still resistant. And so then finally, and other people started saying the same thing. And I just started a very small email list and I would just send them the messages every day. Somebody else came around later and said, Roger, you should have a website and just put them on there. I wasn't going to do that either. So they finally did that and I created anyadvicefortoday.com. And so that's how that got created. But I wasn't doing it. And then the live channeling, I would receive information and sometimes I would just sit and pick up my phone and because I knew something was coming through and I didn't want to forget it. So I would pick up my phone and turn on my memo and just channel into that. I never gave it to anyone, never let anybody hear that. That was just for me.
Okay.
Then in 2021, when all of this, when it was revealed to me that I had all this information and also the changes that we would be moving through in our world, my Wilhelm said, "You've got to start channeling. You've got to start doing this in public." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And then I heard, "Well, you might have to break then." That's literally that's what I heard. And I said, "Okay." And they said, "We have too much to say." That's really what I heard. We have too much to say because even the writing was getting difficult because over time, the information would come through so quickly. And so I had spent years writing it in longhand. I could no longer do that because I couldn't read it anymore. I would write it down and then if I looked somewhere else, I could look at it again. I couldn't read the writing. So they said, well, you don't need to do that. Just sit and type it. Just do that. So I started doing that. And so now I can just go to the computer and do it. But then the channeling thing, when that started, I thought, let me try. I heard it and I just did it. And it was crazy because when I did the very first one, it felt like I was home.
Wow.
It was just so easy. But then it shocked me. I just want people to understand if they go through this because what started to happen information started coming through that I had no clue as to where it was coming from.
Okay.
And it was surprising. And I would do this thing. I have a brother who lives in Chicago, and so I would call him up. And when this would happen, I said, "Give me some grounding. Talk to me," because it would be so out of body in the information that was coming through. And but it just that's how it started. And I still go back now and see the connection of all these writings over the years. And my channeling was different because it was connected to the changes in the world, which I had no idea that was happening.
It's interesting that the automatic writing messages where it all began and the individuals that were finding them on the desk,
Mm-hmm.
at that point in time, you still had a lot of work to do within yourself. You weren't
Oh
even
yeah.
really conceptualizing what the messages were for. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see how those messages may have been intended for you, but you as one is one as a whole. So
Right.
whereas one is where one message is working for us, it's working for all of us as the collective can all tune into the same
Exactly.
message.
Right.
That was very cool.
I was just talking, they're getting the meeting I was having with Guy, just a while ago, and we were talking about that and how this is going to be presented. And this is going to be the biggest audience that I've ever had because it's being streamed to 180 countries in
Yeah.
addition to the audience that we have there. And so we're just figuring out the logistics of all of that. And I said, the thing that I want to give and what my topic was about what we're moving through in the world, this planetary ascension. But I wanted people to understand how they contribute, how each person contributes to what's happening, not only in their life, but in the world. And
Right.
so, if we can make the connection between our lives being happy and fulfilled, and that's creating a better world, then we get about creating a better, happy life. That's what
Right.
we've got to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. The manipulation has been placed into our fear of thinking that the world changing as a whole is a very big project and it's too much for one individual. But when
Right.
in reality, all we must do is focus our attention on ourselves because if we change our vibrational frequency, navigate the dense energies, transmute it with love, live in this high vibrational state, that therein affects the change of the world. Not only does that affect the change of the world as the whole, but you have changed a new reality by creating one. So essentially, your
Yeah.
world has changed.
There was so interesting. You should say that. I would receive all these messages, and I would push them away. They said, "You came to be love." I go, what? No, I didn't come to do that. That's not me. I didn't come to do that. And it would keep coming up. You came to be love. I go, okay, I know that's kind of my nature. I'm always like that. But to be expressive about it and to talk about it was really challenging because I know that the only reason that we struggle is because we can't accept the love of ourselves. We can't go to that place.
Right.
And which again, why that message was so important to understand. We have different evolutionary paths. Sometimes they're messy. Sometimes we go through a whole bunch of crap.
Yeah.
But when we can understand it and traverse it or overcome it, we've ascended, and then we can give that to others, and that's what we're all meant to do.
Well, and I think in the path to euphoria, one of those messages was saying that we were born into this world under a belief system, and the people that brought us up were teaching us what was good and what was bad and
And
what was right and what was
yes,
wrong.
yes, yes.
And we never really had a chance to develop under our own understanding. Like, of course, we need guides to understand like how not to hurt ourselves and to
Right.
put food in our belly and stuff like that. But the fear concepts that were the most damaging to us is what is created of this reality. And that's okay because it just is. So once we can appreciate that and go, wow, okay, I can see all of those things and all of these experiences that happened for me in my life to
Mm.
teach me about myself and the reality of the real world.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that because there's certain people that give information that just resonates. Dr. Bruce Lipton, for one, because he always talked about the programming that we received when we were quite young. Says the ages, what, up till between up till 9 years old or something. I don't know, whatever the ages were. But when you think about that and your life and your childhood or wherever it might have been, we can kind of see patterns or something we might have developed. We have to think about it in the broader sense, though, too, because as humans, why would we come in to the world and have a belief in hatred or belief in being racist, for instance. Where did
Yes.
that come from?
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
taught us?
Yeah. And that's like racism is a great one to talk about because it's like the world has put a belief system into us that our identity is the container that
Right.
houses the light. So Roger is the black man in front of me. And it's like I'm so grateful that through the journey within, I have now been able to see the light within Roger. So and it's beautiful when we can, understand these concepts because what people don't like about another individual, let's say, like in Canada, lots of immigration, things like this, people are always speaking out against another race or culture or language or whatever it may be. It's like you don't not like the external vessel. You don't like the action of the light that is housed within the container because all light has an opportunity to create action that might affect another individual, but we get lost on the idea and the conversation surrounds the external vessel of what the action of the light may have done. And I think when we can talk about it that way, then we can hold ourselves accountable for who we are on the inside. And that's why I love what you're doing, is because everything that you're talking about really translates in that message.
I have to tell people this because I got started. I was being pushed through this. That's what it felt like. I was pushed through this journey a while ago. But so I was writing articles. That's where I started doing this when I wanted to talk about what was happening in the world and the changes because they were going to affect all of us. We're going to feel it because it's all energy. And so the first thing that I did, I put out an article in 2016. It's all of these are on my website too. That people can see it. There's a string of them over the years. And this one was called I Might Be Racist, might be how do I say I might be racist with misogynistic tendencies. And so I mean, it was like, and people go, why are you talking about that? I said, because I had to acknowledge that there were things in me that I didn't know, the
Right.
beliefs that are limiting that I was carrying, and I picked them up from all those other people who came before.
Yeah.
And that's what I can't, if I don't acknowledge them, I can't move through them.
Yeah, like that's what I was going to say is accountability. This is where humans are so quick to blame or
Mhm,
victimize a situation because it doesn't have them become accountable. And
mhm,
that for me was a lot of where my progression in my ascension began or the journey within began.
mhm,
That is actually the beginning of it was the accountability that I could hold to myself for the actions that had consequences for all of the choices that I had made that brought me to that jail cell to surrender my love to this energy of love.
mhm,
Jesus, that's just an energy, but
mhm,
that was the where it took place. And rather than be held in contempt and relive emotional repetitive cycles that I was not processing, that was the alleviation of the repetitive cycle of the emotional trauma was, wait a minute, I can say I was shitty in this
mhm.
life. And you know what? I didn't have tools and education on how
Right.
to love myself. And I didn't have an example of an individual speaking their truth or
Mm.
authenticity. So, yeah, I didn't have everything I needed. And shit, that's okay. I made a lot of poor choices. But who am I today?
Yeah.
Who am I right now?
And that's it. I just got this just before we came on. Somebody made a comment on one of my videos, said, "Well, how do you love yourself?" That is the thing that most people want to know. And I said, "Well, first thing you've got to do is stop judging yourself."
Yeah,
And so then when we can notice that, because our judgment has been programmed in for whatever reason. And yeah, it was stuff we did that was terrible, but that's okay. When we
right.
can acknowledge it, oh, I screwed up, I did out, and I had to acknowledge all of the things that I did, and start to become accountable, like you said. But and then as you keep moving through that, you release this burden, this all this stuff you've been carrying around, and then you start to heal. And that's the part that I mean, physically and mentally and emotionally. But the physical thing that was really uncomfortable for me to talk about for two reasons. Because, and this is going to be, and I'm changing this now though. I'm so empathetic. So then when I've healed this stuff and I see other people who are suffering and I know where they are and I'm going, can I tell them that it can be changed? Can I tell them that because I'm in this different state now? And
Right.
so I thought I had to get over that and stop worrying about it and just give the information about what is doable because I know. People read like this book, You Can Heal Your Life, that Louise Hay did, a long time ago. She talked about all these physical things because she understood and she moved through them and she understood how they were basically connected to some aspect of us that we weren't owning, that we
Right.
didn't understand. I mean, in a general sense. And so I started to discover that too. And when that started coming up, I was uncomfortable sometimes when I would talk about it to people. I reached this place where I had this tremendous healing, and then I went to a club to meet my friends. And this one friend, she's sitting there and she's like, "Oh, I'm just in the top of the world." And she says, "Well, I have long COVID." And she was just in this bad place. And I said, "Oh no." And so then I'm feeling bad because I'm just coming in talking about how healthy I am now.
Right.
Anyway, it's just we have to understand, accept those experiences that we go through.
Right.
Mhm.
I can appreciate that feeling of being in one state and then being
Yes.
surrounded by another. And I'll share this with you, something that has helped me with that. When I did surrender my love to Jesus, what that meant, like in the jail cell when I had my conscious awakening, or rebirth, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that was shown to me had nothing to do with religion, but more so the example of a human life.
Hmm.
So I was able to witness like what Jesus was and what he stood for, and he was a high vibrational frequency. So the same feeling that you curated and you were living in, he was able to take that frequency and share it with those that were in a denser state just
Hmm.
by being an example. So not so much as where we throw our experience on them, but just we're emulating this frequency that it's just so incredible. And now, because I do look to these spiritual teachers as examples that I can lead my life by, and
Right.
I've seen their journeys, and I'm like, wow, okay, they didn't have money, they didn't have much, they had time,
Hmm.
energy, love, and a higher understanding of life. And equality was for all. So I've got to
Hmm.
be an example in places that are difficult. So
Hmm.
that's how I began to step out. And I mean, the world viewed me as a 23-year junkie,
Hmm.
a homeless drug addict convict.
Hmm.
So I can appreciate stepping out of the comfort zone and being the example that we
Hmm.
have become. And it is difficult in the beginning, but yeah, we just practice and keep going. So,
And the person who helped me the most with that was Carl Jung.
oh,
And
beautiful.
because I happened to find I hadn't studied or anything about him before, and so but I happened to come across some videos. I was just led there, and I found one where he was talking about being an introverted intuitive or introverted intuition or all of that because he was like that. He was so intuitive, but he was also very introverted, which is why it would take him a while before he could understand what he had received and then be able to give it to others. And I've done that my entire life. I mean, the introverted thing was really difficult for me. But then trusting that intuition because it was so strong. But I said, people aren't going to understand. And I did go through that so much, especially even with those around me, my family, because they had no clue as to what I was doing in the beginning or how this was coming about. But I'm saying, but I knew that I was meant to help uplift some way, uplift others. I couldn't have the life that I did and gone through all that crap like you have gone through that. It was for a greater purpose, a greater reason.
Yeah, sure. It sure don't feel like that when you're in it, though.
No, not at
but
all. It
but
was, oh,
it
yeah.
it's
Talk about dark nights of the soul. Yeah. How many of those did I have? Yeah. So you get it. Yeah.
Pei Ming and I were talking about this today, that she had commended me on overcoming the difficulties that I had faced. But in her life, she was a single mother that walked away with two kids, and
Hmm.
she had to change careers and all these pressures of the unknown. And I thought, and I said to her, and it's just the same as I would say to you and anyone listening to this is, your experience, the level of difficulty, is as difficult as any other experience because
Hmm.
we are the ones carrying it. And when
Right.
we're living it and when we're in it, it could be the same as a guy who's junkie, homeless on the street because they're feelings and the
Hmm.
experience does differ, but the feelings are one and the same for all of us
Right.
because they hold us in that dense energetic state. I see you today though, and I'm like, you have such great energy just looking at you. Like when I saw you the first time yesterday when we talked, I was like, you are just like the great guy, you know? It's like you have that. You have
I,
that.
and I don't, I'm just trying to emulate that. It was so funny because Jason, I was talking to them, and Gaia, when I went and filmed the show, and I came out of, this was back in June, and I don't think about what I'm doing. I'm just being there. And I came out, and the entire staff was like, "Oh my God, that was so wonderful! Thank you so much." And Jason was just telling me that again, that's what happened because they have a lot of guests that come in, but they just loved having you there, the energy of it. I said, "Okay," and I have to come to embrace that more because I think that what happens is I've never been a person that's boastful or like I had to move beyond my ego in all of this. That's really what it was. And I think when you can get to that place, that natural radiance starts to come through.
Yeah. You've certainly cultivated something new because if you're telling me of an identity that you portrayed once before, you sit here in front of me today, and I'm good with character and intuition and reading certain patterns within humans,
Mhm.
and you've created something new and beautiful, and as we all, not all of us have it figured out, but certainly it's a gift, Roger.
Right.
Like to take what you have and when I was watching the path to Euphoria, and I know that you do charge for your last development program, and rightly so. I mean, you've got information within you,
Mhm.
and it's beautiful, and it comes from a higher realm. It's amazing. One of the things that came to my mind though was to offer some of your information to
Mhm.
the youth because you have that. Like
Mhm.
you're just so easy to be around, and you would never know it looking at you, but you're 76 years old, so you found the fountain of youth within your light as well, which is, oh, 73,
So
sorry.
three, 73, yeah.
73. You found the fountain of youth within your life, which I cannot ignore and I absolutely love. I feel like when I was watching it, this came to me and I was like, I got to tell him about this. That, what state are you living in?
California.
Yeah, man, LA, bro. Like, I mean, there's you can get up in some places and maybe help the youth with what you got and leave
Right.
that as a legacy behind. Because you talked about your work ending, but what I was thinking and what was coming to me is how does he continue the work after he's gone?
Well, no, the problem is not, it's not ending. It's what happens is I haven't put it all together yet. That's what really happened. I had so much of it and I haven't put it all in there. And that's what I'm doing now because it was, again, so surprising to me. But I'm seeing well, I'm so glad you said that because the youth of that's really the important part. And I had one person who took the program, and she was in this horrible place in her life. She literally she was ready to check out, and I'm thinking, no, there's something you're supposed to do, and I know what it's something. And so I got her to go back in and look at her life, and she finally got to this place where she realized, oh, I want to work with kids. And so now she's put up such a great she's built this company where she's talking about educating kids on their study habits, and then getting parents to understand the kids, building communication. And so her whole life has just turned around, and she's doing it through the kids. So there's this whole ripple effect, that we can have.
Well, and I think for you and me, like even with a generational gap, it doesn't matter. Everything you and I do, Pei Ming, all
Hmm.
my other guests that I have on this show, we don't do it for us. We do it
Right,
for this new generation. And
right,
I realize, the financial system and with everything that's built, the belief system
exactly.
we have today, I'm currently in the same situation as you. I'm trying to find, my balance. I do have a construction company that pays for everything. So everything I do right now, I just offer for free. But I
Hmm.
do see, like for myself, money's a tool and it's an energy we can use to
Hmm.
redistribute and help others grow. So that's so cool that you talked about what the girl was doing because I want
Hmm.
to build schools of consciousness. And the
Right, yeah,
schools of consciousness, they don't just teach the youth, they teach the parents as well
yeah.
so that we have multi-generational learning.
Perfect. Yes, exactly. And so what I'm doing now, the reason I'm finishing it the way I am, because when people come to the program, they own it. Because what happens is you keep going through it because we're never done with what we're going to create. You know, there's going to be more, and you start to go back and do the assignments again or ask more questions, and you get more information. So I had to come up with a way so that anybody could do it. So what I did was I made just a monthly thing that people could come in, so it's not a big deal. And then what I do is I work with them. You know, I go in because we have group calls, which we had one this morning. It was so brilliant, and it's the synchronicity of us when we come together because we just whatever problem difficulty might be going on, we kind of collectively work through it, and that's what happened this morning, and I love that. So they have that as well when they're doing their own work, their own assignments, and moving through that. But then the group calls are they're so valuable because a lot of times when we're hiding out, when we come into the call, then they're starting to express themselves. They're starting to see that they're moving through the same kinds of things that others are. It's just been a really great experience.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to begin doing that as well. My friend's in Houston right now, and he did some course. I'm not sure what it was, a personal development thing, just like you and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of offer. And he said that the practicality of going
Mm-hmm.
into a space with the community and being not forced, but pushed
Mm-hmm.
out of their boundaries, or
Yeah,
in a space where it was okay to step out of your boundaries and
right.
ask questions
That's it.
like that.
That's it. Yes, that's the safety of it. It had to be. I was determined to create something that would have no judgment. We have no anything. We accept everything, and this is why I'm so transparent with them because I say, listen, I'm not done. I'm still discovering things. I just brought in this information, but we're all going to keep discovering and developing something new. We're just doing it together. The age of Aquarius is what we're
Right.
doing.
Absolutely. And I think when we open up these safe spaces, like you can come in there with whatever learned behavior you have. Like if there was racism in your life before, or if
Mhm.
you were somebody who had more than other people, or if you did feel less, you can come into these spaces and talk about anything because you were taught those things.
Right.
So it's
Exactly.
important to be in a space where you can say, hey, whoa, whoa, that's cool. Let's talk about it. And then we're going to work through like where
Mhm.
these understandings came from, and we're going to look at them a different way together. And then the individual can heal on its own because
Mhm.
it's got a space to do that. That's really great.
Yeah. One of the greatest things that I do with them, and they love this, I think I called this process a little something different though, but I said, how to have a happy childhood. People look at me and go, no, I had a crappy childhood. I had this, that, and the other. Go, no, you didn't. I said, we just have to find the gems in there. That's all, because you weren't placed there accidentally. And so then when you can, like you were saying, when you can reinterpret all of that, it becomes very different. And every single person has gotten so much value out of doing those exercises in understanding their origins, their unique genetic code, you know, and all of that, because that's all part of their path.
Yeah, and I don't know why I'm going back to racism, but even somebody who was in a racist environment, it's like, look,
Mhm.
that's education. You
Yes.
understand what it's like to have that sort of ideology and all of the feelings that come with that, but
Hmm.
you have seen that in another way. So
Hmm.
someone who had that, you could go into spaces where racism is being promoted as something that has value to it, and you could say, hey
Hmm.
guys, like I've got an awareness to what you're going through because I've
Hmm.
been there.
Right.
So that difficult experience that we find so much shame in actually has a lot of beauty in it once it's processed and
Yeah,
transmuted. And you can
exactly.
teach others the way out. It's like or guide them to a new inspiration.
There's something that happens too. This is and this is a long time ago, so I want people to understand this because our ideas have changed now. But when I was a kid, I in school, most of my classmates were Jewish. You know, this is the school where I was growing up in my seventh and eighth grade, and so at my best friend who lived right across the street from me was Jewish, and he was having his bar mitzvah. And out of all the classmates, we were all friends, all of us. I was the only one who wasn't invited to the bar mitzvah and his parents loved me, but they couldn't get over this generational thing. Oh,
Yeah.
they couldn't have a black person come to this.
Yeah.
It was, and so when I got when and that I was destroyed. I mean, when you're 13 years old, and to
Yeah.
have that experience, But then I said, well, but I came to understand it. I came to understand why at that time they were operating in that way, because it was a societal norm at that time. But so experiencing that and understanding, okay, but we can move over it now, which is what we're meant to do now, this particular period in our world too.
Yeah, well, like I mean, you had such a high awareness to you because that could have been a pivotal change in your
Hmm.
life where
Right.
forever you would have held on to this resentment and not been accepted and seen,
Yes.
religions and color as being this thing that hurts you that you couldn't get over, yet you alchemized that very, very quickly. And that's where I have so much sympathy for individuals who are stuck in whatever ideology they believe that
Right.
is not of equality and love. Because once you do the inner work and you take a program like your last development program, you really begin to see that we're all brothers and sisters, that
Mhm.
that the light within is really what we're witnessing, but we're just confused by the organic vessel that houses
Mhm.
it. So it's more the experience
I'm so
that
glad you said that because that's the thing behind the philosophy that I was given. See, the philosophy that I created your last development program, but the philosophy that they told me, and which I'm writing a book about this, is called Your Life Operating Instructions. And what they said was that we're moving through a change in our world and we have to operate differently if we want to have a world that's sustainable. And in order to do that, we have to let go of all the old stuff. Anything that we thought that about racism and misogyny and all of those things where we kept people separate or, this inequality. And we can see that happening all over the world now, all over the planet. And so, but it becomes up to each of us to decide that we're going to move to a higher state of understanding within us, which is why I had to purge everything, you know.
Yeah, and I mean that's a really like wonderful observation. Like people believe in many cases that it's up to the establishments and
Right.
organizations and these religious or like whatever it may be
Mhm.
to change the way the world is operating. And it's like no,
It's
no,
us.
that's the movement that's got us to this place. Now it's
Exactly.
up to us.
Yes. Well, one of the things that comes through, Wilhelm says, you are your government. That's what it
Yes.
says. And I
Yes,
said,
that's so true.
yeah.
Talk about Wilhelm. Let's educate people on because you say they say, and I want people to understand who Wilhelm is and what they means.
When I first started, and this is so fascinating, the story I'm gonna write most of this in the story as well. And when I first started coming through, and this was 1989 when I wrote the first message, it frightened me at first. And I said, oh, who's talking to me? And I heard, this is another part of you. It's your higher self. But if that makes you uncomfortable, you can call us whatever you like. And then I just said, Wilhelm, had no clue as to where that name came from because I wasn't German, wasn't doing any of that. So I didn't get it. But anyway, over years, it started to become revealed to me because everywhere that I was, they showed me. I'm not going to just go into all of this, but I'll say at one point in my life, I was living in Chicago, and I lived on a street called Goethe, and I didn't know what that word was. I didn't even know how to pronounce it, and then I didn't look it up. And later on, I discovered that Goethe, the philosopher, had written this book, this thing called Wilhelm Meister, The Search for Self-Actualization. I go, oh, well, that's what I've been doing all my life. Well, how did I get that? Then they started revealing other things to me. They introduced me to Friedrich Nietzsche. I go, I had never studied him either. And then I go there and I see his middle name is Wilhelm. Then I started looking at Carl Jung and I'm hearing all his stuff and I go, I know this information, but I haven't studied him. Where's that coming from? I'm listening to the Red Book because I had the audio book, and at the end of it, Carl Jung is making a thanks to Wilhelm. I go, what? Where is that coming from? And then I looked it up, and it was this Richard Wilhelm who had worked with him, who was really influential in a lot of the work that he had done. Then I look at Richard Wilhelm, and I see that he was inspired by Goethe, the connection. And so what they're saying is that we are all connected. And the reason that they say they have me always refer to we when they come through, because they want all of us to know that we're connected and we would just access things differently. They didn't want me to make a distinction like I was the only one who was accessing some higher spirit or Archangel Michael or any of that. We can all do that. So that's why they always refer to we, because they want each person to know that they have the ability to access higher dimensions of consciousness.
And it would also make sense that Carl Jung would be Goethe and Goethe would be Richard Wilhelm. Because we are all of the same one.
Exactly.
The experience, yes, Roger, Justin, Carl, okay,
Right.
fine. We can differentiate between the experience, but if we understand the light and the essence of the light, it's all one.
Right. The
Oh,
first
that's
message, the first message they gave me in January, and they had me go back and find this stuff too. January 1st, 2012, the very first message in terms of this work was infinite intelligence. We all have it. We just access it at different times when we choose to do that.
hmm.
And that's exactly the information. They say consciousness always exists. It doesn't go anywhere. We don't go anywhere, but we have to access the available consciousness that is around, or intelligence or information, and then we're meant to take that and build upon it and create something new. And that's what we're doing now.
And that's very interesting. When you say that like that, immediately what came to my mind is when I was in that jail cell and I did surrender my love to Jesus, those words came out of my mouth. That was the affirmation. I always said that was a key. And I was
Mm-hmm.
confused as to what that key was, but the key was the awareness. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
awareness was implemented into something more, but I
Mm-hmm.
still had to do all the work to obtain higher consciousness.
Right.
So I had to undo the 23 years of damage that I had done to
Mm-hmm.
myself, understand the past, learn from it, integrate with all of my experiences, and I still do that to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I do it, and I am my greatest experiment, so
Right.
my work on myself is my work that I'll leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
That is what offers me the greatest results.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
It's
Yes.
wild. That's wild when I think about that.
And so, oh, this is good. I'm going to tell you this because I receive things, they should have me show things, and I can't even explain it because time is fluid. And the messages I received were before, and they'll have me go back to particular dates. And the one that they want me to pay attention to now is that self doubt is purposeful. They said we could, because we suffer from that. We move through this self-doubt, and they said that's okay because you have the doubt because you haven't accessed the thing that you're trying to get to yet, the information, you don't understand it. So don't judge it that you have the doubt. Just decide to investigate, go to the next level of whatever that is. And
Yeah.
that is but they just keep sending me messages at times when we're moving through challenging times in our lives or in the world, and we will doubt ourselves or whatever's going on. But when we move to a higher state of understanding, then we can kind of dissipate some of that doubt.
Yeah, and a wonderful way to obtain that higher state of understanding is even with myself. I just pushed myself to try new things, and I
Mm-hmm.
also found comfort in discomfort. I
Yeah,
found that when I was uncomfortable, I was
yeah,
learning about myself. I
yeah.
was like, okay, this is good,
Exactly.
you
That's it.
know.
I used a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. She says, "Do something that scares you a little bit every day," or something like that. That's what she would say. And I go, "Oh, that makes sense. Something that makes you a little uncomfortable," as you're saying. Yeah.
It's true. We were late for we had a connection on a flight from Mexico to Vancouver just last week,
Mm-hmm.
and there was 20 of us that were on this plane that they were rushing through the airport to get us on this Vancouver flight. And there was people of all sizes and different experiences and everything like this. And one of these women, she sat down in the seat in front of me and she's like, "Oh, my heart is racing. I can't believe that." I said, "Oh, it makes you feel good, eh? Reminds you you're alive." She's like, looks at me like with intensity. She's like, "Yeah, it really does." I said, "Remember, this was a lesson to try new things and to become and to remind yourself of what you can do." And she
Mm-hmm.
just looked at me. And I was like, that's it. Like the opportunities we have in life, like something like being late for a plane where everyone's stressed out and afraid. It's like, no, no, no. It taught you a beautiful lesson. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been a really wonderful thing for me to find the positives within the negatives
Right.
as
Perfect.
well.
Ah, good deal, sir. This is great.
I'm curious what it's like for your family. Like, okay, so like this is a common question. When information comes into this, like an individual, and
Hmm.
you're in a you're in a family setting,
Hmm.
how does that relationship work? What's happening there?
I had to force myself to talk to them about it. I had to do it. And so part of when the pandemic happened, this was actually pretty good though, because we were doing Zoom calls a lot. Everybody was. But so because we were online so much, I could finally start telling them, and they were shocked at all the things I had been doing for so many years that they had no clue about what I was receiving and understanding and all of that. But so now I would always use them first to talk about it because I wouldn't go public. I couldn't tell the public what I was doing because it was too unbelievable even for me. So if I could talk to my family and they have some acceptance in different ways. I have couple brothers that are really religious, and so they had a little trouble with what I was doing, but I said, because it should be this way in terms of their religion, and I said, I'm only talking about love. And so I think that when we can get to that place and bypass any kind of religious beliefs, then that's the work that I'm coming. I love religions and what they have, except if they start to make us separate, if they start to make us less. I would always feel, and I love that you talked about Jesus or Christ consciousness, because I would always feel uncomfortable during my life at holidays, at Easter and Christmas, because I would always feel underneath, I'm not sure we're understanding what we're supposed to be doing here. I'm not sure we're getting the point of these holidays. And it always make me, feel this, because I said, we're supposed to embrace the idea of what Jesus could do. That isn't that it? That means letting go of judgment, letting go of all of the limitations and doing more. He said we could do more than he had done.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. And so,
And it's interesting, like, I love that you brought that up about the holidays because I was highly aware of that as well. I really had a big disconnect from religion. And I did a
mhm,
podcast earlier this week with Alan Simberg, and he said all of religion is based off of whichever one, Buddhist,
mhm,
Muslim, Judaism, whatever it may
mhm.
be. They're all
Judaism,
built
yeah.
off the principle of love. Yet
Hmm.
religion stepped in and created control, and they separated us
That's it. Yes.
from God. And then more so, we have corporations that are influenced by religious understandings and
Hmm.
political agreement that we can consume materialism to display our love to those people that we surround ourselves with by buying things on special days. And it's like,
Right.
that is that, like, I remember thinking about that when I was a kid because my parents were they came from families that didn't have too much in the sense of materialism. So
Hmm.
naturally, they would give me all of the materialism that they didn't have in their life. And I began
Hmm.
to see, I was like, why are we buying things to show our love? Like, isn't
Hmm.
human connection more valuable than love? And
Hmm.
certainly, I didn't have a language for that as a child, but
Right.
I was aware of it.
And that's what and then you can see this generational patterns, like my father. That was the biggest thing for him, because he couldn't show the emotions in a certain way, and he was always struggling in a certain way, but he would try to go out of his way at Christmas to, like, finally get something, do something. But the connection and the emotion was what, that was the different generation, so showing that was really uncomfortable for him, and I came to know it. Funny thing, and it happened after I understood it after he died, actually.
Hmm.
Because I went back to Chicago after he died, and we were getting ready for the funeral and all. And years before, I had been performing all the time. I was doing shows everywhere, singing. And so I would always send him, and they were always concerned about me going into entertainment or doing anything like that. And so, but I would always mail him every announcement of what show I was doing, and the whole bit. He never talked to me about it. He never said anything. And I said, okay, I guess he just doesn't care and all. And so I didn't bring it up, but I still kept sending him all the announcement. When I got to Chicago and we were cleaning out his house, I go into a dresser and open up this dresser drawer. And at the very top of it, every single announcement I had sent him was stacked in there. He had saved them all, and he just couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, it just, I just think about it now. It was the shock of that. I go, oh, he just couldn't express himself. That was all.
I think I don't know how grateful I am to say this to you right now, but like you saying that immediately connected things to my father. And my
Mm,
father and I had a difficult relationship as well. And there's so many reasons we had a difficult relationship, but man, did you ever just bring a language to something
mm,
that I have been trying to put into words for quite some time. My father struggles to display emotions. It's not that he
Hmm.
doesn't have them, it's just he doesn't know how to share them to me. And
Right.
it's funny because when I was a kid, I was so sensitive. I
Hmm.
was an empath. We're all
Hmm.
empathetic, but
Right.
mine was I was tuned in. Like the reason my emotional traumas, people ask me this, they're like, Justin, you never really talk about your emotional traumas. Well, from I do, but they're just not traumatic in the sense of physical or sexual abuse. But
Mm-hmm.
I I was a water sign. My outlet was tears for happiness, for joy, for
Hmm.
frustration, for anger, for sadness, for whatever it was. I just had this release, this what it was. But in our family, we did not talk about how we feel simply due to the fact that people did not know how to display emotion. And that just made a whole lot of sense to me. It's not that they didn't know how to communicate about it, they didn't even know how to show it. Obviously, I was shown love for sure,
Yes.
but it was through different forms of society, like materialism, and my mother loved me
Yes.
very much, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like
Oh yeah. Oh
it
yeah.
wasn't there. And now I just like my whole timeline just flashed in front of me when you said that. And I was like, holy shit, I have the same thing in my life, man. Now I'm going to go home and see my dad in a month and be like, I get you, man. Like, and him and I have been working on the realizations that I've come through. Like, my dad wasn't seen and heard as a child, which
Right.
makes
That's
him controlling and shit. Because
yeah.
he was always controlled in his life. But I resented him for that because I am his polar opposite. I
Hmm.
am the rebel, the anarchist, the nonconformist, like disbeliever. Like I just want to have fun and party and wild out and be crazy and learn about everything and try everything, even heroin. And my dad's like, "No, wait, that's not good for you. Don't do this shit." And I'm like, "No, you're too much." So that caused a lot of friction, but
The other thing is think about that when we understand our family dynamics too, because we were placed there for a reason. So I started to see that there was a real separation in my family too, from my mother's side of the family to my father's side of the family. And my mother's side, she everything had to be a particular way. There was a presentation that you had to do, and I said that's why I got so uncomfortable with even being my natural self because there was a certain way you had to be, and it was just how they were raised, you know. And so I remember going home. This was, I think, after therapy 1 year or something. I was going through a lot of things, and I went to visit my grandmother, my mother's mother, and we weren't there was no affection that was shown, you know. And I had gotten to this place when I meet someone I hug you, and
yeah.
I went there and I thought we didn't do that. So I went and I grabbed my grandmother when I went into the house and gave her this hug, and you could see the look on her face. She was just like so shocked. What's happening?
Really?
Because it just had never happened before. And I thought I have to break that old generational thing that was going on, you know. And then we
It's
start changing.
it's trauma though. What you're speaking to is
Exactly.
generational trauma. Your grandmother
Yes.
was never hugged and loved because
Yes.
no one taught her parents about self-love and self-care. It was experiences that, created belief systems
Right.
surrounding that. You know what? My father and his two sisters, they one of the biggest things that has come up over the last 10 or 12 years is that they tell my grandmother, you never loved us as child.
Mhm.
You never hugged us, you never showed us love in that way. And my grandmother was so confused. And she
Mhm.
said, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, because she didn't remember, because it wasn't it was normal for her not to
Exactly.
do that. But
That's
that
that's it.
disconnect within their lives messed all three of them up. And I
Yeah.
mean, I love my family so much, and it's okay to acknowledge that we've
Mhm.
had difficult, upbringings that teach us certain things about ourselves. And I am the way I am with anyone, even my family, and we can have difficult conversations today, but very interesting when we see, experiences and how they've come to fruition.
One of the things, and this is old, if people ever listen, they can find this online though. Um, I happened many, many years ago, I stumbled upon John Bradshaw. He was he's an author and he wrote several books, but one was called On the Family. He did a series called Homecoming, and then he did a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. Made a lot of different things. But what he was talking about is these generational patterns that we all formed. And he had a PBS special for a while on the family where he was just saying the archetypes that we would form
Right.
and the ideas and all of that. And so when you start to listen to that, and people can find this on, on YouTube. Listening to them, it's just the most amazing thing because everyone will find their family in there. Everyone will hear that and know, oh, now I understand why I might have been this way, or I formed this particular way of being or thinking, whatever it might be. It
Yeah,
was,
like even with racism, like this is a generational trauma that's been led to believe to individuals that
yes.
we're different than each other because some of our families in whichever area we were born in, it might be more relevant for
Mhm.
people to be brought up in this philosophy because of the normal practice of society from a long time ago.
Right.
Because
Right.
that's what they're witnessing is that normalcy to something that was abnormal, yet it was
Exactly.
practiced. And once we can really appreciate that, we can go, okay, like these people have been taught learned behaviors that they find completely acceptable due to
Right.
the nature of the generation before them.
Right. And then when we start to, I'm so glad we can talk about things in terms of neuroscience a little bit more too, because um, we won't understand why people can't understand that they're not seeing the biases, because when we have formed a belief pattern, which is a generate a neural pathway that we formed about how to think about anything, it's challenging to move over that. And so you
Right.
can't even see the other side, so that we form this cognitive dissonance. This is a much better way to be. No, I can't see that because I've been used to seeing only this for my entire life,
Right.
and not understanding we can change those ideas and the beliefs as well. So that's which what we're up to now.
Right. And I think a lot of people say to me, Justin, how did you do it? How did you overcome such a difficult experience of behavior? Well,
Mhm.
honestly, quitting the drugs when I was ready was the simple thing. Rewiring my brain 4 years after I've been out of that practice is a daily constant upgrade.
Oh,
I yeah.
you just remind, I use this all the right. Les Brown gave me this greatest line. It demonstrates what you're talking about. He said, the easiest thing I ever did was to earn $1 million. And he said, the most difficult thing I ever did was to convince myself I could do it.
Oh, nice. That's for sure.
Yes.
I I think another way to look at that in today's society is the easiest thing I could do is earn $1 million. The most difficult thing you could do is give it away.
Oh, that would be a good one too. Yes,
Right?
absolutely. Yes.
Like
But
that would
see,
help.
but that belief, to understand that we're moving through whatever it might be, we're always moving through a limitation that just exists in our beliefs.
Yeah, exactly. And to know, like this is where I talk a lot about God. So
Mhm.
my understanding of God or the prime creator as I've come to know it is made up of energy. So divine
Right.
masculine energy and a divine feminine energy. So we are made in the prime creator's image. So that divine masculine and divine feminine energy is within us. And if
Mhm.
God is a creator, then we are creators of our own reality. So a belief system that may be so embedded and ingrained in a human just needs to be shown perspective that it can see things another way and it can begin to shift its reality into that trajectory, making a bunch of mistakes along the way, but at least you can line up with a different version of yourself by creating it.
You're channeling a message that just came through today. I was putting it out there, and it says that when you come to balance your masculine and feminine energies within yourself, then your world will do the same thing, and you'll see healing occur.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's the harmony within everything. When we find the harmony within ourselves, it's
Mhm.
like we redistribute that harmony within the earth. And that's what's happening. The shifts, from my understanding, is a harmonious
Yes.
vibrational frequency that's taking place. And for many, it's very confusing. Like even for yourself, like being a channel,
Mhm.
being an individual who has a connection to a higher source, it is confusing at time, and there's a lot of information that floods in sometimes, and we don't
Mhm.
have schools or communities where we can go and talk about how we're
It's
feeling.
just
But this is it. This is why we do
That's what
things.
whenever I'm doing a channeling session, when I'm getting ready for a channeling session on like a new moon or full moon, and I start getting downloads like crazy. It's just like, and it's just so much information that's coming in. It gets a little exhausting at times, but it straightens out by the time I actually do the session. But yeah, that's what it is. There's so much information that we're all carrying, and so the meditation or calming down and listening and all that is what helps.
Yeah, that's where, tools like yoga and
Mhm.
meditation, people are
Yes,
unsure. They have expectations surrounding their function, but
correct.
it's just the stillness of self. If yoga, you can find stillness in your breathing through movement, beautiful. That's its design. Meditation, if you can sit there in stillness and observe your thoughts and observe your being, great, beautiful.
Yes.
For me, I use sound bowls. Oh,
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
oh
that's yeah.
gosh.
The
If that
vibration. Yeah, that.
Oh
Yeah,
man, it hits me in the chest like
yes.
I am like all of a sudden I become fluid and I'm like, "Oh my
Yes.
gosh, like I'm going with this."
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Uh,
Beautiful. The world is a wonderful, strange place, but it is and again, for people listening to this, I mean, Roger and I both know the time is so challenging, and there's so many souls flooding in at
hmm
this time, which is why we have 8 billion people on the planet at this time, if
hmm
not more.
hmm
It's because we've come to witness the end of something and really be a part of something new. Yet the belief system we drop into, like Roger's channeling messages talk about, are that of the individuals that we're born into. So we're just trying to move through that learned behavior that is not good for us and really prepare for the new earth.
That's what we're doing. Good deal, sir.
I appreciate you, man, for this.
Thank you so much. This is
Really
great.
great.
Yeah,
So,
we'll do more.
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you back on, talk about more concepts, and
Absolutely.
I'll put all your links for people to find you and get a hold of you in the
Great.
description below. Yourlastdevelopmentprogram.com is where they can go and find you
Yes.
and connect to all your wonderful things, man. Thank you so much for today. I appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
Roger.
This is great. All
Much
right.
love.
I'll see you soon. Okay.
Ciao,
Bye.
brother.